Hello, everyone. This is Ed Brendiger, and welcome to the Eddie Network podcast. My guest today is a local friend of mine, Caleb Drown, and he's doing some really interesting stuff. We're going to talk about that, but it's good to have you here, Caleb, and good to know you. And I've enjoyed watching you just talk about this new thing that you're doing, this business that you're doing. And why don't you kind of give us an idea what you're doing and how you came to do that?
Yeah, yeah. So I am a crafter of non-alcoholic beer. We will probably get into some of the past, and I haven't always defined myself as that. It's actually a relatively new mantle I took, and I'll get to how I got to that, but. Really, this is a business where we're focused on creating craft non-alcoholic beers for life's adventurers. And so the idea behind it is for people that are that are engaged in some sort of activity where they want to keep a clear head. They can still enjoy a high quality craft beer and maintain that feeling. I Going back just a little bit in my history, I was training for a triathlon, and I've loved beer for a long time throughout much of my adulthood, and maybe even a little bit before then. But I really um, really I've also had a struggle with alcohol, and have found a need to really moderate that, and I've gone through a number of different recovery programs to find freedom. And so all of that really, there was a moment in time where I was training for a triathlon, and my little sister, who had gone through Alcoholics Anonymous a couple years prior, had started drinking non-alcoholic beers, and I was always skeptical. And she came up to me with actually some, I think it was athletic brews, and shared them with me, and I was just surprised how good they were. And at the time, I'd been working on an MBA entrepreneurship certificate, and through UNC. And so I tasted them, and I was just really surprised at how good they were. And of course, at that time, I'm looking all over the place for ideas for uh, things that I could start up. And so I started exploring the market a little bit and realized that this is a really exploding area of the craft beer industry. And so I started working with App State University on developing first non-alcoholic beer. And now we've got a second one we're rolling out. We're hoping to be commercially viable here in about a month. But it's been months and months of development. And so I'm just very excited to be at a place where we're able to start offering something.
Well, I'm very excited for you. You brought a couple of samples to our Wilkes Entrepreneurial Network meeting a couple weeks ago, and we got to sample it. And I was amazed at how good it was. I mean, really, it was really good. I mean, it's up there with all the standards that exist for craft beer, and that's what amazes me, that you can separate the flavor profile of a classic, say an IPA, and separate the alcohol out from it, and it still remains that same flavor profile.
Yeah, it's been surprising to me, and the surprise really has continued to remain with me. So it's a very exciting adventure to be on, for sure.
I could see a huge market for, say, selling your beer at sports events. You know,
Hmm.
in some places they don't allow alcoholic beer or alcoholic beverages in sports events, and here they could do that, and people would, you know, would love that. So I
Yeah.
just see a huge opening for you as you move forward.
Yeah. Speaking of athletic events, the World Cup, the in Doha, just just within the last 2 years, they banned alcohol outright, and the Middle East is a big part of my journey in history, and so I've thought since then, going into the Middle East with something like this would be very interesting as well.
So tell us some of your background now. So you've kind of tantalized us with you had some kind of history in the Middle East. What is this? What has what's that story? What's that story?
Yeah. So haven't always been in the mountains of North Carolina, although they feel very much like home and I love them.
Yeah.
So I actually um, went into the Marine Corps, did a couple years of community college, and went into the Marine Corps when I was 20 years old. And I was enlisted, did 4 years. This was 2004 to 2008. So I deployed to Iraq while I was in the Marine Corps. And I got out, and pretty hard to translate some of the skills you develop. But I ended up finding a job working with the U.S. Agency for International Development, USAID, and they do humanitarian work on behalf of the U.S. government. They're really an element of U.S. foreign policy's arm, connected very closely to State Department. And so I started working with them, and because a lot of my USAID colleagues saw me as an experienced military, someone with military experience, they decided to put me into a role working on Afghanistan as the Civ Mil liaison, and so ended up going back and forth to Afghanistan, working in collaboration with the U.S. military and with humanitarian workers, and trying to bridge the gap between, I think, Birkenstocks and boots. And it was very interesting. I had only been enlisted in the Marine Corps, and I got out as an E5, a sergeant. And all of a sudden, I was sitting at these tables with these military planners, colonels and generals, and talking about USAID and what we were doing. And I don't think USAID knew nearly how little I knew about the military and putting me in that role. And then these military commanders thinking that, I'm a civilian, and, I've got all this wealth of experience. And it was a very growing experience for me, a very challenging and daunting experience as well. And so I did that for about 4 years, and then left USAID and started working for humanitarian organizations. And there I continued to circle kind of the Muslim world, I guess, Afghanistan and Pakistan for a couple years, and then came onto an organization called Samaritan's Purse and worked for them up until really February of this year. And most recently, I was the regional director for the Middle East, for our operations in the Middle East.
Well, that's fantastic. That's a great organization. Does a lot of good. Know some people that are there. Interesting your connection to Afghanistan. I have a connection to Pakistan, and I spent a summer in 1981. So back during the Soviet War, I spent a summer doing refugee work, and I was with a team, and we traveled the northern third of Pakistan, up in the mountains, up in the Northwest Frontier Province, up in the Hindu Kush,
Wow.
up there along the Chinese border, and we were looking for refugees, both Afghan but also Central Asian refugees from the Soviet republics,
Hmm.
um, and we traveled almost every day somewhere. We didn't spend 2 days in the same place almost the whole 8 weeks that we were there. It was really fascinating.
Wow.
And the probably the coolest moment was we were in this uh, northwest frontier city called Chitral, which is up on the border. You probably know where it is.
Yeah. Yeah. You
And
could never go there now, by the way.
uh, oh,
With your complexion, you could never go there now. I even when I was there, I it would have been
oh, I'm sure.
super dangerous now. Maybe
Yeah.
even then.
Um, no, they because of the Soviets, they liked Americans.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So but so we come into Chitral and we actually spend a week down in the Kalas valleys, which is south of Chitral, and these are non-Muslim Pakistanis, and they're animist, and they're as um, primitive and as you can imagine, and it was fascinating. They were lovely, really lovely people, but the one of the pathways from Afghanistan into Pakistan was right through their villages. So we walked up the pathway, almost to the border
Hmm.
until we saw a Soviet helicopter gunship fly over our heads. And he said, "Oh, I think we'll turn around and we'll go back down." But the real highlight was we went down into the riverbed where there was a encampment of Mujahideen, and we spent an hour or so with them. And our host lived. He had been a school teacher, and he and his wife had been school teachers in Kabul. And when the war happened, they left and came to Peshawar, and they set up this orphanage. They were finding Afghan orphanages, taking them in, and teaching them how to weave rugs. And then they were once they reached 18, they provided them a community down in Lahore where there was a community of rug weavers down there, and they would go down there and live with them, and they would have their own loom. But meeting these Afghans, I have a picture that I've used often. And just sitting, and we got this collection of Afghan faces, and what Gordon, our host, said. He says, if you look at that, you'll see all these tribes of Afghans. He says, and if they weren't fighting the Soviets, they'd be fighting themselves.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
yeah, that's pretty. It was really fascinating. So having been there, I appreciate what you were doing, because it's very difficult. And this is what 40 years later or 35 years later, and that period of time there was really transformational.
Yeah. It's a wild place, that northwest frontier province of Pakistan, and then really all across Afghanistan. I'll tell you one story too. Just I so I was working for USAID, and we went down to a military base in Western Afghanistan, and we had guys that were called foreign service officers at the time, and this guy was actually an Iranian American, brilliant foreign service officer, very well. What these guys' roles was they were civilian embeds with U.S. military units,
Mhm.
and they had a pot of money, and they were going around and basically awarding small grants to communities, almost like maybe what you'd see in a Peace Corps sort of activity, larger scale, with more technical expertise for sure. But the idea was just winning over hearts and minds um, to the Afghan government, and we're trying to connect. And one of the things that is immensely challenging in a place like Afghanistan, or where you were in Pakistan, is people are extremely democratic there, and they really don't want the government involved in their business. It's actually not too far fetched from a lot of communities in America.
Mhm.
And they just want to be left alone, protect their sisters, keep their guns, and and they want to run their own small village. And so myself and this guy, both Americans. We walked off this military base, and he had arranged for this other gentleman, Afghan local, to pick us up, and he motored up in his little Toyota Corolla, and I hopped in the front seat, and my uh, buddy was running it, the unit there, hopped in the back, and he had his maybe 6-year-old son in the back, and he handed me an AK-47, just kind of grabbed it off the floor of the car and handed it to me just in case, and we went buzzing around for a couple days. We traveled around this district, this remote desert district in Western Afghanistan, and it was an amazing experience. I kind of saw the U.S. from a different perspective,
Mhm.
watching drones fly overhead and kind of military engagements and stuff. But we were visiting different water projects and things, and he was talking about schools. And this guy had done a tremendous amount in his community. He was very influential. And I finished up there. I got back to the U.S. and I was responsible for training people who were deploying to Afghanistan. And there was a guy who I used a picture of this Afghan gentleman. His name was Faisal Ahmad, and I would show his photo to the class, and I would talk about just how important it is to integrate and get to know the community and not be stuck behind the walls of the compound that you're living on with the military, and how this was a real success story of building relationships with the community. And after one of my presentations, a guy maybe in his early 30s came up to me, and he goes, I know that guy who's in that photo. This is our host, our Afghan host, who had taken us around. And I was like, really? Faisal Ahmad, you know him? And he's like, I was with the US military and we were hunting him. He was one of our top targets in Western Afghanistan, because he was at that time was opposed to the governor of the province, an early established governor, Ismail Khan. And he said this guy was telling me this story. He was shocked. He was like, "You're telling me this warlord turned and was working with the U.S. government?" And what had happened was this Afghan warlord who was in power over that province, who Faisal Ahmad was fighting with, he got moved to the central government of Kabul, Afghanistan. And as soon as that happened, his arch enemy was gone, and he saw it valuable to join with the U.S. and flip sides. But it was just kind of an interesting, wild
That's
experience.
exactly what we were told was happening there when I was there. Was that they their allegiance is to their local tribe and their local community, and they will oppose anyone who wants to threaten that, and anyone
Mm-hmm.
that wants to support them, they will be with you until they decide you're no longer supporting of them. I mean, it's
Yeah.
and um, and I'm not being critical in saying that. I'm just saying that's the way it was, and it was interesting. But they were also some extraordinarily kind people that we met. Um, the the seminal experience I had while I was there that changed it literally changed my life. It affects me to this very day. We were we were in the plains, the desert plains west of Peshawar, going that it backs up to the mountains where the Khyber Pass is. Dirt, dust, hot, heat, and we find this small encampment of probably 200 or 300 Afghans. So we come in and we look at they have some records, and we find out how many adults and how many children they have, and we find out what the conditions are. And so we go back into town, and we bring back some food, and we bring back some new tents and some clothing for them. And we unload, and we're getting ready to leave. And this man comes up to me, and I get choked up every time I tell this. He comes up to me. I'm I'm what, 27, 28 years old. I mean, I'm as green as you can imagine. I have nothing I'm just ballast, and he comes up to me and he takes my hands in his hands like this. My hands are and he shakes my hands and he reaches up and he strokes my beard. And that's all. There were no words exchanged. And then he walks away. And Gordon, our host, later that evening says, what he did was what one Afghan man shows honor or gratitude to another Afghan. And and Caleb, I had never in my life been thanked
Hmm.
in such a significant way. And I realized that I was supposed to be there to learn that lesson, so I could become a person of gratitude, like this man who I don't even know his name. I have a picture of him, but I don't know his name, and I don't know what I would love to know what happened to him, but that's not possible, because that was the only time we had that encounter. But that encounter was very instructive to me about the way I should live my life.
I wish everyone could experience some of these just warm cultures and the ways that people communicate through and simple things too that people are so thankful for often. And when you're stripped, of so much, I know, for me, a big piece of my love of the Middle East and kind of the Central Asia region, and I know this is true of a lot of places, but was just how deep the hospitality really was, and how it often went way beyond, it was sacrificial hospitality.
Right.
It was you'd be in refugee camp time and time again. I'd be in refugee camp and people would beg, you'd walk by and people would take your hand and pull you in to sit down in their tent. And it wasn't even that they were asking you for something. They wanted to give you something, and it was like time and time again. I was like, why am I just here to be blessed? Like what, it's remarkable.
Well, I think we think we're going there to serve them, but in
Right.
reality, they're serving us. I found this true when I encountered a group of Africans back in 2019 and got invited to come to Africa to do leadership training. And one of the guys, Isaac, heads a group that does rural economic development training, and they're in probably 12 to 15 countries, 18 countries, something like that. And so he's in Western Kenya, and we're in Western Kenya at this training center near where he lives. And we go over to his little farm. He has a farm. It's next to his parents' house, and they had a house at one point, and then they built another house, and they turned the old house into a school, and now they've taken the house that they once had, and now they built it. I think they've built another house and turned it to the new house, the old house, into a retreat center, And so we're walking around the farm, and it just stuns me. I mean, it just stuns me that this kind of mindset is there. And he points over to the edge of this little field that we're in. He says, and that's where I'm going to build you a Nandi hut, so you will always have a home in Africa.
Uh,
I felt like I was thrust back into um, uh, Karen Blixen's world. You know, um, what's the name of that famous film with Meryl Streep and Robert Redford? It'll come to me in a minute, um, but she comes to Africa and she says, I had a farm in Africa, and she tells that story. And that kind of warmth, that kind of um, human connection is strange to us Americans, don't you think?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it is. I don't know why I don't know why we build the walls we do, I I don't know if it's wealth and privilege. I don't know if it's maybe just kind of a frontier mentality of, I'm gonna do it myself. I'm gonna make this, it's me and mine, and I've got to just kind of figure it out. But uh, one thing that I've loved too about being in these cultures, both in terms of the hospitality, but I think even just emotional walls that we put up. I've seen uh, just grown men shamelessly cry, in cultures, and I know I think even still to this day we're still, people say we're soft, we're getting soft, but I don't know if we're soft in the right ways all the time. I
I,
just
I,
I think it's that level of vulnerability with one another, and reliance on one another. You can't really do it on your own. You need other people around you, and whether it's family, whether it's people in your community, and when you lean on other people, they're happy to deliver for you, but you just got to lose some of the pride that keeps you
yeah,
from doing that. And I think that's one thing that for me, going back to what you said about, you travel overseas and you think you're going to be the savior, you're going to deliver whatever people from whatever situation they are, and you're so humbled when you see both the resilience in these communities, but you also see this is what you long for. There's a great book, I don't know if you read it, by Sebastian Junger. Do you know him? Anyways,
tribes. Yeah,
tribe,
right.
yes, okay. Well, I don't, but that whole principle of, like, you lean on one another, and it's that communal experience that everyone is sharing, and experiencing together, that develops community resilience. And when you kind of separate and segment everyone, and that's why veterans, when we've returned from combat, we come back into the society that's all broken up into different you know categories and segments and groups, and you're like, where's like, I've experienced something, I don't know where to really share that with other people. And often why so many people, or at least why he says veterans struggle so much on their return.
Well, I think we get trapped in social expectations that are not healthy for us. Um, and some of that is to protect protect institutional structures that don't need protection, but we
Mm,
build these walls,
mm,
and but so I really do think that travel is a monumental thing for us, and we need to do more travel, and and I and I know a lot of people that travel, but they travel in groups like themselves,
mhm,
and and particularly over the last decade, my travel has almost all my travel has been by myself, I alone, and it's interesting to find yourself as a lone American in a culture, whether the culture is France or Kenya or Thailand, whatever you may be, Korea. It's when you're by yourself, it signals something that you actually are interested in who they are,
mm.
and they're willing to give you some time to tell you about their stories, and I'm grateful for that, and I like to do more of that travel. There are places I haven't been, continents I have not been to. I mean, I have, I know people in Australia. I'd like to go to Australia, and I said, and I'd like to go to Australia, rent a car, and drive, circumnavigate the whole continent.
Mm.
well, you really can't do that. But I said, well, I'd like to do something like that because you encounter people and you're able to learn about people, and you really learn that. And this is what I found. I'm curious if what you have found is that at some level we're all very much alike, and that likeness is far more significant to us as individuals than the things that are different.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think I've um I've yeah, every place I've traveled, I've found that, and I think a lot of that is our desires as well are very much the same, and different people in different communities create space for that, differently, and create margin for that differently. But I think for me, as a father, bringing, being overseas with my family, that was also a very unique experience because all of a sudden there were um, new openings where other families came alongside us and, helped parent our children, or, contributed in different ways to our growth and development. I mean, I just, my son still, so many of their uncles, we lived in Iraq as a family for almost 3 years, and for them, they talk about all these great uncles that they had, who drive them to school or pick them up, or, when there was a bully in their neighborhood, their uncle showed up and went out and talked in Arabic to the bully, and it's just, it's really profound. It's really profound to be even adopted as a family in another culture. And I think, to credit to our society too, like, I think that's the true story of a lot of refugees who come here. There's an Afghan family right here in Wilkes County who've been adopted by a whole community of people who have loved on them, have helped them get enrolled in school, gotten them a house. There's a church right in town that's just doing a lot. They've actually brought the dad. He's a Muslim, and they brought the dad in to tell us your story. Just and people were able to ask him questions, and they had all these great exchanges. And so I think we do that too. I think when we encounter something so different, there's a curiosity that kind of draws us in. And I think we're even able to be vulnerable in a different way. All of a sudden, what kind of is the expected norm, we're not really sure what that is anymore. And it opens us up in really neat ways. So I think there's a beauty in that connection.
So I wonder how. I mean, I wonder how we can change the way we operate within our communities, where that sort of reality that you just described can become the norm. Because I don't think it's that way. I mean, I moved over here to Winston-Salem back in February, and I didn't really have a clue as to what my neighborhood would be like. But I found that I'm in a very um, interesting and mixed neighborhood. Racially mixed, economically mixed, culturally mixed, um, maybe legally mixed. Stuff going on here that I don't want to know about and I don't want to have any contact with. But at the same time, my neighbors and we have conversations like what you're describing, and we talk, and you know some of them sit on their front porch, and I stop by, and we have conversations, and so we learn to respect one another, and we learn to put say some boundaries on what that relationship will look like and things like that, um, and so I think that kind of is a way that we can maybe help our communities be much more, not so much open to new people, but actually open to being a community, which I
Mm.
think is a different thing than simply, oh, we're going to invite you in, but we don't want you to lead. I mean, that's one of those the leadership things that I saw early on in my career, is that a company would hire new people. But there was this vetting process for whether those people would be allowed to make a difference. We want you to come and join us, but we want you to understand how we operate, and so they're not actually being included. There was a lack of inclusion going on. And, and so one of the principles of leadership that I really advocated, early on was, when you have new people join your group, join your company, join your club, immediately give them the opportunity to participate as a contributor, and give them opportunities to contribute in a way that's meaningful. Because I think that's what's happening in a lot of those places where we go. People are inviting us into their homes, whether it's Africa or Iraq or wherever it may be. And they say, we want to welcome you in, and we thank you for whatever you may be able to contribute, even if it's just attention,
So I told you I've been on a journey of recovery, and
Yes.
I think this hits really close to home. It's something, I'm a part of a church. I'm a Christian follower of Jesus, and I have I have found that sometimes I think sometimes in Christian communities you can get this idea of like, we've got it all figured out and we've just got to help those who are on the outside who don't know all the truth yet.
Right.
And what I've found about going through recovery and being a part of a recovery program is it's a great equalizer, and everyone who's there is seeking healing from a hurt, a habit, a hang up, but they're doing it they're all at different levels, right? In their level of sobriety, and ultimately in relationship to their maker. And I think what is really neat about something like a recovery group is very quickly people are given a responsibility in that group. Hey, would you read the prayer tonight? Would you share, where you're at in your journey? Everyone gets a chance to speak in the small group, and that has created, at least within the recovery group that I'm a part of, just this bond that is so deep, and that you wouldn't have, people that are good church people sitting in the same room with people that, you see walking on the side of a road without a sidewalk, and I think you're exactly right. I think we need to create those sorts of spaces where people can be safe and vulnerable with one another, but also feel like no matter who they are, they can contribute something and have a meaning and a purpose. And that forges community in a neat way.
I think some of the source of this conflict or trauma, whatever you want to call it, is the fact that, and I don't mean to make this too theoretical, but over, let's say, the last 200 years, we've gone from people living in small towns and doing work that supports their families to moving into industry where they're defined by their job. Their identity is, I'm a laborer, I'm a woodworker, I'm a steel worker, I do that. That's my identity. And then that shifted mid 20th century to, I'm no longer what my job is. I'm now defined by what I purchase, what my consumer tastes are. So, I mean, growing up in North Carolina, where NASCAR and racing is big, and it's big here, you could divide the community up between people who were Chevy, Ford, and Plymouth promoters or supporters in the stock car world. And if you were a Plymouth people, my family were Plymouth people, you bought Plymouths. You didn't buy a Ford, you didn't buy a Chevy, you bought the Plymouth because that's who you were supporting, you know, and that those kind of consumer choices became how we defined ourselves and how actually we separated ourselves. So we're now a Democrat or a Republican, you know,
Mm.
and those are very hard. It's a hard division. So all those kind of consumer things became very um, problematic for how we live together as human beings in community. And I think that that's coming. I wouldn't say it's coming to an end, but it's coming to a level of awareness where we recognize that this is wrong. This is not healthy for us as a society. And so the kinds of thing you're talking about, oh, we're gonna come together and we're going to acknowledge that we all suffer. We all have some kind of trauma that we've experienced, and what we really need are other people who can identify with that and support us as we kind of work through whatever it is we have to work through.
Yeah. Yeah. I love your optimism on it. And I do see that happening in threads, in different places. I mean, I even see it. I think that it'll be interesting to see generationally how this plays out, in younger generations.
Yeah,
My boys are Gen Z, and we've got some very young, apparently there's a new generation after Z, but nephews and nieces,
in Alpha.
but yeah, Alpha, but yeah, Gen Z.
How
I
old
mean,
are
what
they? How old are
my
you?
one is 13. My sons, one is 13 and one is 16. Um, but one of the things that I found that's interesting in their world, and this might not be true of everyone, this might not be universal experience, but one of the things that I've just been surprised at with watching both of them, and this might not be a universally shared experience for everyone. So I'm in a very small part of the country experiencing this, but they're at public school, and they both seem very comfortable with kind of who they are, and not, my experience in public school was like you had to fit in with, the jocks or the goths or something, and you kind of fit your group. And maybe this is not true universally, but I've just seen them, and among their friends, like, yeah, you share similar interests and you kind of identify with groups, but there is a little bit more of an acceptance of kind of those unique traits that make you who you are, and maybe as a reflection of something good happening.
I think it's a reflection of Wilkes County. I think Wilkes County is a unique place. It's a special place,
Mm, mm.
and I I I miss parts of it. I know that I'm no longer there, but so I think there's something about Wilkes County that is um, provides that kind of groundedness. Let me say that in that way. And I don't know what that really is, but
Yeah.
it's my experience, and and I think it's and maybe in some ways because nothing's changed there in a long time. I mean, you know, it's a funny thing. So, but I'm glad to hear about that. And do your boys recognize that?
I don't know. I don't know if for them it's anything unusual. I think they just are, yeah, they're comfortable being who they are. My 16-year-old, he's just developed an interest in opera, which is crazy. I don't know. I mean, he wants to, and I'm like, there's nowhere in Wilkes County. We're gonna get you an opera teacher,
Oh, he wants to
but
sing opera.
yeah, yeah, exactly.
It's
But
funny.
and there are adorable things too, that they're into video games and that kind of thing. But it's just been neat to see that freedom, to kind of be who they are. So
Yeah, my kids are all millennials, and you know, it's a very different time that they grew up in than your
mm,
kids, and you know, because when I guess the first, well, from my oldest to the youngest, when the say the youngest reached 10, we were pretty much a family of one computer and no smartphones.
Yeah,
And
that's
then everything changed.
yeah.
But I treated them, my purpose was to treat them as adults because I didn't want them dependent upon me, but I really wanted them to be independent and be able to think for themselves. And because I knew that would serve them well, and it has. But it's
That's really wise. Yeah, I think I mean, can I just for you as a
yeah.
father, how did you do that? How did
I
you teach
stopped
them?
answering their questions, and I would enter into conversation with them when they'd ask a question. So we'd have a conversation. So what do you want to what is it you want to know? What is it? So try to develop their question, so that it's really has some depth to it, and so we could have a conversation, and particularly with my sons, one is 38, one is 34, particularly with them, the conversations we have now are like what we had 20, 25 years ago. Yeah. And so I treated them as equals as well. And here's a very explicit example. So when my oldest son was 16, 15, um, we moved from one, when he was 15, we moved from one Boy Scout troop to another. Left a troop that was kind of in some turmoil. We went to this other troop. It was really small. And within six months or so, the scoutmaster of that troop left. And so I ended up taking over, and had never, I had 1 year in Boy Scouts as a child. So I really didn't know anything about it. And I said to my sons, listen, I don't know what we're doing. I don't know what I'm doing here. So I need your help. I said, so we're going to debrief, going home every Thursday night. We're going to debrief of what went on, because I need you to keep your eyes open so you can help me be the leader that I need to be for the troop. And that's exactly what happened. And so we became partners in that shared endeavor. Um, and the fruit, is they both ended up as Eagle Scouts. And I never talked to them about being an Eagle Scout. I never pushed them on it. It was all up to them. And that's the way I said, this is all on you. I got plenty to do. I can't mother you. I can't father you. I have to, you have to decide. And so one of them had his board of review the night before his 18th birthday. That's the last day he could have had that. And the other it was in the last month before his 18th birthday. But they did it, and I'm proud of them for doing that. So that we still have that kind of level of conversation that goes on. And they send me stuff every day. And we're a lot of it is stuff that is representative of something that happened 10 years ago, 20 years, that is a reminder of that. And we have a good laugh over it.
Hmm. That's really profound. I think I've 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 tried to do that with my boys as well, to varying degrees of success, and we'll see in the long term what the outcome is. But I do think, looking at the different parenting styles I've seen, my father very much grew up with us boys. I felt like he was
Uh-huh.
he was a student of life. He was a wanderer, and he challenged. We watched him challenge, kind of, and question and probe, and it never really felt to us like our dad had great, profound words of wisdom. But I think that was so influential in each of our own development and success. And he just walked life with us and would explore things and wonder things with us.
So
And I think there's something really exciting for a kid whose parent takes that approach.
what was his job? What was your
He
dad?
was so he's a teacher now. Um, he was actually, for a long time, he was blue collar print. He worked in a print shop, on a printing press. like old school printing press,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
but he always wanted to be a teacher. And so he actually packed my siblings. I stayed in, grew up in Chicago, but he packed up my other four siblings and they all went to Idaho and he went back to school living with his brother to get his teaching degree. Him and my mom both did that.
That's
And yeah,
fantastic. They were doing what a lot of people are now doing when they hit their 40s. They're making radical change of career direction, and the the number of people that I'm having conversations who are in that frame is extraordinary. I mean, it's almost an archetypal example of change that's taking place. You know, when you hit your 40s, you're going to go through change that is going to give you a new life, totally new life that you didn't expect to have. And then, I mean, I'm one of those. I mean, I became a consultant when I was 42, and having never been a consultant, never run a business, but I knew how to talk to people, so I just talked myself into. As my oldest son said at that point in time, he was 10. He said, "Dad talks to people and having problems and offers to fix them." Well, that turned out to be pretty accurate. So you see, that's that give and take between the father and his children, where they understand the father really well, and it's the subject of support and belief, but also of fun. Where you can talk to your father in such a way that yeah, it's a so and it carries on. So I've just
yeah,
recently gone through hip replacement surgery, and my son's trading off. Spent 2 weeks with me, and I came away with that saying, well, the oldest was Nurse Ratchet, and the youngest was Dr. House, and that was the way they treated me during those 2 weeks, and we had a good time. So
wow. It sounds like you have, yeah, great relationship with them as a result of that.
yeah, so well, this is fantastic. So let's return to your non-alcoholic beer, and let's finish with talking about what your plans are with that, and and this is we're in early March, in early May, so this will come out sometime in June. So tell us kind of what's coming in terms of the release of your beer.
Yeah. So this is I just want to go back to one thing you were talking about people transitioning in their 40s. I also
I know.
transitioned. So I turned 40 and right around the time I was launching this business, it's actually maybe 1 month before I turned 40 that I actually just developed my LLC. So very much in line with what you're seeing from others.
I think, yeah.
But yeah, so I we have we actually have product available in very limited amounts right now at a couple restaurants. We're still very much in the customer discovery phase. I was down at Western Carolina University. We had a big blind taste test with 9 different non-alcoholic beers. People were all getting flights of these, like sample a non-alcoholic beer and giving their feedback. And um, I was very happy with how our non-alcoholic beer stood up against the big names. We were beating some of the big name commercial non-alcoholic beers, um, and that was still at we're still tweaking the recipes a little bit on it. So in June we should have our first fully commercially available product that will be marketing, selling primarily first through breweries, restaurants, bars, but then also offering online options as well for people to purchase. We will have a hop water very quickly behind the first non-alcoholic beer. The one we're doing right now, it's called I'm Parched. It's a Appalachian Pale. The hop water will follow. That's called Twistified. That's going to be more of a citrus hop water. And then we'll close behind that, we'll have something called an Alpenglow, which is a little bit more of an amber ale. And then ultimately have an IPA and a stout come out as well. Hopefully, all of that this year. We're really branding ourselves as an Appalachian outdoor themed company. So if you see our product, it's a couple friends of mine who are in Tennessee who are phenomenal artists who are developing our labels. It's very, I think, Ed, you saw it. I don't have product with me, but I don't know if we can link to my website or something.
Yeah.
But you'll see in the labels, just there's a lot that goes into it, into the label and the design and the artwork and some of the words that are used on the label and the poetry that we put on the label. And what we're trying to communicate is that's the same amount of craft that we're putting into the actual product going into the can. So we really want to stand out as a high quality craft non-alcoholic beer. And that's where we're headed.
And the name of the beer is your company.
Bright Barrel. Yeah, it's
There.
Bright Barrel. Yep.
Very nice. I like that. Well, thank you for being here. I love your story. I mean, there's a lot. We cover a lot of ground, and I didn't know a lot of it. I didn't know hardly any of this, and so this is really fantastic. And I look forward to seeing you again soon and having a beer with you. And
Absolutely.
look forward to
I
that.
look forward to it. Maybe another podcast. I'll get you a can and we can both sit here and sip it.
Yeah. I did that last year with a guy that has a bourbon uh,
Oh,
community on Facebook. It's called
hmm.
a bourbon community live or something like that. Bourbon live. I forget what the name of it is. And he at that point in time he had about 26,000 participants. You would find, go back and find this. It was back in June. But what he started his thing because he found that there were people who, particularly men, who were not having social relationships where they could actually share things. So he created this bourbon community where people found commonality and they found people that they could end up having conversations with. It's
Wow.
really so. There's some similarity there. So I'll send you a link to it.
Fantastic. Yeah,
So
I'd love to see it.
thanks for being here and thank you all for watching.
Thank you.
Yes, and please sign up and hit the like button and leave a comment. And we'd love to hear what you think. And if you're in the Winston-Salem, Boone, North Wilkesboro area, go look for Bright Barrel beer, and you'll I think you'll be very pleased. If you're a beer drinker and a beer lover, you'll be very pleased because I certainly am. So thank you all. Thank you again, and Caleb, and we'll see you next time here on the Eddie Network podcast.